the shocking duty every woman faced in Babylon. Picture this. You're a young woman living in ancient Babylon, around 500 BCE. The sun rises over the magnificent ziggurat of Marduk, casting long shadows across the bustling streets of the world's greatest city. But today isn't just any day. Today, you must fulfill a duty that every woman in Babylon was required to perform at least once in her lifetime. A duty so shocking to modern sensibilities that it challenges everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. Welcome to the most controversial chapter in Babylonian history. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most debated practices of the ancient world, as recorded by the Greek historian Herodotus in the 5th century BCE. This is the story of a religious obligation that bound every woman in Babylon, regardless of her social status, wealth, or personal desires. Ancient Babylon wasn't just any city. It was the crown jewel of Mesopotamia, home to the legendary Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Its walls were so massive that chariots could race along their tops. The city buzzed with merchants from across the known world, speaking dozens of languages, trading in silk, spices, and precious metals. It was a cosmopolitan hub where cultures collided and merged. But beneath this veneer of civilization lay religious practices that would seem absolutely shocking to us today. The Babylonians worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, with fertility deities holding special prominence. Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, was particularly revered. It was in her temples that the most controversial of all Babylonian customs took place. According to Herodotus, every woman born in Babylon was required, by law and religious duty, to go to the temple of Aphrodite, which he identified with the Babylonian goddess Ishtar at least once in her lifetime. But this wasn't for prayer or offering sacrifices in the traditional sense. The purpose was far more shocking and personal. These women had to sit in the sacred precinct of the temple and wait. They would arrange themselves in rows, wearing crowns of rope around their heads, creating pathways between them. And then they waited for strangers. Foreign men, travelers, merchants, anyone who wasn't from their immediate community would walk through these pathways, examining the women. When a man made his choice, he would throw a coin into the woman's lap. The amount didn't matter. It could be a single silver coin or a small fortune. The value was irrelevant, because once that coin landed in her lap, she was religiously bound to follow that stranger. She had no right to refuse, regardless of whether she found the man attractive, repulsive, young, or old. The man would say, "May the goddess Ishtar make you fortunate," and then led the woman away from the sacred ground. What happened next was considered a religious act, a sacred offering to the goddess. Only after this ritual was complete could the woman return home, her religious duty fulfilled forever. But here's where it gets even more shocking. The beautiful, wealthy women might complete this obligation quickly, perhaps within hours or days. But those who were less conventionally attractive, or who came from poorer families and couldn't afford elaborate clothing or jewelry, might wait for months, even years. Some women, according to Herodotus, waited so long that they actually built temporary shelters around the temple, creating a semi-permanent community of women waiting to fulfill their religious obligation. The social implications were staggering. Imagine being a young bride, knowing that before you could truly begin your married life, you had to complete this ritual. Picture the anxiety of families, sending their daughters to the temple, not knowing when they would return or what kind of stranger would choose them. The wealthy found ways around the harsh realities of this system. Rich families would hire professional priestesses to fulfill this duty on behalf of their daughters, or they would ensure their daughters were so beautifully adorned that they would be chosen quickly by desirable men. The poor had no such options. Their daughters might spend seasons in the temple precinct, exposed to weather, dependent on charity, waiting for any stranger to finally choose them. This practice raises profound questions about the nature of ancient religious beliefs. To the Babylonians, this wasn't degradation or exploitation, it was sacred duty. They believed that through this act, women were honoring Ishtar, ensuring fertility for themselves, their families, and their city. The goddess demanded this sacrifice of personal autonomy as proof of devotion. But we must ask ourselves, how reliable is this account? Herodotus, though called the father of history, was also known for including sensational stories that may have been exaggerated or misunderstood. Some modern scholars question whether this practice was as universal as he claimed, or whether he might have misinterpreted religious prostitution that was limited to actual temple priestesses. Archaeological evidence from Babylon is frustratingly silent on this specific practice. While we know that sacred prostitution existed in various forms throughout the ancient Near East, the exact nature and scope of these practices remain hotly debated among historians and archaeologists. What we do know is that ancient Babylonian society was complex and sophisticated. They gave us the first written laws under Hammurabi, advanced mathematics, astronomy, and literature like the Epic of Gilgamesh. They were pioneers in urban planning, agriculture, and trade. Yet they also maintained religious practices that seem barbaric to modern sensibilities. This contradiction forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human civilization. Progress isn't linear. Societies can be simultaneously advanced and primitive, sophisticated and shocking. The Babylonians, who built magnificent temples and deciphered the movements of planets, also bound their women to religious obligations that stripped away personal choice in the most intimate matters. The story of Babylonian women's temple duties serves as a powerful reminder that history is never simple. It challenges our assumptions about ancient peoples and forces us to grapple with practices that seem impossible to justify or understand. Whether Herodotus's account was entirely accurate or partially embellished, it opens a window into a world where religious devotion demanded sacrifices that we can barely comprehend today. As we reflect on this shocking chapter from ancient Babylon, we're reminded that human civilization has always been a complex tapestry of progress and regression, wisdom and folly, beauty and brutality. The duty that every Babylonian woman faced wasn't just a religious obligation, it was a reflection of an entire civilization's understanding of divinity, duty, and the price of sacred devotion. And perhaps that's the most shocking truth of all, that such practices existed not in some barbaric backwater, but in one of humanity's greatest cities, among people who considered themselves the pinnacle of civilization.